In this class, we are going to discuss about the autonomy of central bank. Central bank autonomy means the extent to which it carries out its function independent of executive and judiciary. That is the freedom of monetary policy makers from direct political or government influence in the conduct of policy. That is freedom of central bank from the interference of government is termed as the central bank autonomy. There exist different types of autonomy. They are goal autonomy, target autonomy, instrument autonomy, and limited autonomy. What is a goal autonomy? Goal autonomy entrusts the central bank with responsibility for determining the monetary policy and exchange rate regime, or simply the monetary policy if the exchange rate is floating. It gives the central bank authority to determine its primary objectives from among several objectives included in the central bank law, or rarely to determine the objective if there is no clearly defined objective. Thus, goal autonomy is the broadest degree of autonomy and authority. That is the goal autonomy is the autonomy to determine its basic objective. Second one is target autonomy. Target autonomy means that it entrusts the central bank or monetary authority with the responsibility for determining monetary policy and exchange rate regime, or simply monetary policy where the exchange rate is floating. In contrast to goal autonomy, target autonomy has one clearly defined primary objective stipulated in the law. That is, in this case, the autonomy will be stipulated in the case of a single objective. That is, the objective will be targeted. Third one is instrument autonomy. Instrument autonomy implies that the government or the legislature decides the monetary policy or the target in agreement with the central bank and exchange rate regime, but the central bank retains sufficient authority to implement the monetary policy target using the instrument that central bank. That is, here the government as well as the government decides the monetary policy or the target in agreement with the central bank. The central bank has the authority to implement monetary policy target using the instruments of the central bank. That is the instrument autonomy. And the fourth one is limited or no autonomy. It means that the central bank is almost a government agency. The government determines the policies as well as influences the implementation. There will be no autonomy at all. These are the four important types of autonomy: goal autonomy, target autonomy, instrument autonomy, that is, monetary policy instruments will be decided by the central bank, and the limited autonomy or no autonomy means. Then what is a central bank independence? Central bank independence generally relates to three areas. They are personal matters, financial aspects, and conduct of policy. Personal independence refers to the extent to which the government distances itself from the appointment, terms of office, dismissal procedure of top central bank official and the governing body. That is, how much is the distance that the government keep from central bank with respect to the personnels of the central bank. Second one is financial independence. Financial independence relates to the freedom of central bank to decide the extent to which expenditure is either directly or indirectly financed by central bank credit. That is, the extent of the government expenditure is controlled by the central bank. And policy independence means that the flexibility given to the central bank in the formulation and the execution of monetary policy. That is the policy independence. Therefore, here the central bank independence can be of different types of autonomy can be classified into four, and central bank independence can be three with respect to three areas. They are personal matters, financial independence, and with respect to the implementation and execution of policies. To measure the central bank independence, usually the usual procedure of measuring central bank independence is index of independence. This index of independence comprises of various aspects of the central bank with respect to the different the legal aspects as well as the financial personal matters, etc. They will be considered for the creation of that. In the creation, several proxy variables will be used, and therefore in order to quantify the degree of independence, economists typically assign scorecards on different aspects of central banking. Final degree of independence is measured as the weighted sum of marks obtained under different heads, such as indices of political and economic independence, index aggregated from a number of basic legal characteristics of central bank, index based on issues relating to composition of board members, frequency of transfer of central bank governors, etc. These measures will be considered for creating an index of independence. There are some limitations also. The existing indices of central bank independence is clearly incomplete, and the major problem is with respect to the problem of poor proxy variables for measuring the exact independence of the central bank. We will see the Indian situation. What is the level of central bank autonomy in India? Evolving relationship between the government of India and RBI can be broadly divided into four phases. That is, the relation between the government and RBI can be broadly classified into four distinct phases. The RBI was established in the year 1934. RBI was fully under the government dictatorship, and after independence, RBI was nationalized in the year 1948. In the earlier years, the conflict between the government and the RBI was minimum, and during this period, the RBI was vigorously involved in promoting institutionalization of credit to agriculture industry and for achieving the objectives of 5-year plans, etc. Therefore, the conflict between the RBI and central the conflict between the RBI and government was very minimal. So there was some differences of opinion between the RBI and government over the economic policies. Like RBI didn't approve of the substitution of financial planning by a kind of physical planning in the early years of the planning. Another area of conflict between the RBI and government in the late 1950s was related to the financing of cooperatives and the pattern of organization of lending agencies. During mid-50s, we can see some erosions of autonomy in the monetary policy function due to the emergence of system of ad hoc treasury bills and automatic monetization. Third phase, we could see that third phase is with the nationalization of major commercial banks in 1969. With the nationalization, almost all banks were under the control of the government, and the friction aroused with respect to the various policy measures related to the banks, and it has to be decided by the government. It is under the control of the government and between the RBI. During this period, during the period of nationalization, we could see that the government has influence over the RBI. Phase comes with the liberalization process. Major changes in the monetary policy framework took place in many countries around this time. 1991 experienced a severe balance of payment crisis, and during the post-reform period, the relationship between the central bank and government took a new turn through a welcome development in the matter related to the abolition of ad hoc treasury bills, and these measures eliminated the automatic monetization of government deficit and resulted in considerable moderation of monetized deficit in the later half of the 90s. In recent years, there was problem with respect to the fiscal responsibility and budget management legislation, implementation of international financial standards and codes, and another related to the there is with respect to the operational flexibility to RBI for the conduct of monetary policy and the regulation of financial system. Parliament proposed. In recent years, there was conflict between government and Reserve Bank of India with respect to the following issues. Reserve Bank of India wants more powers over regulating public sector bank, but the government should not dictate the quantum of its surplus that can be paid as annual dividend. Another one is with respect to a separate payment regulator. In these three aspects, there was conflict between the government and the Reserve Bank of India. In 2018, there was conflict between the government and RBI with respect to the following issues. Government wants to ease lending norms for facilitating MSME. The RBI wants to continue banks cleanup efforts. Second one, government wants to set up an independent payment regulatory board, whereas RBI wants it under its own control. Third one is with respect to the government and RBI differed their viewpoints on the classification of non-performing assets. There was conflict between Government of India and RBI with respect to the norms of prompt corrective action. Ministry of Finance started discussions with the RBI governor on issues such as easing prompt corrective action framework and providing more credit to small units. Prompt corrective action norms allows RBI to place certain restrictions such as halting branch expansion and stopping dividend payments, and even cap a bank's lending limit to one entity or sector. Other corrective actions that can be imposed on banks include special audit, restructuring operations, active recovery plans. Banks promoters can be asked to bring in new management too. RBI can also supersede bank's board under PCA. Provision of the revised PCA framework become effective on 1st April 2017 based on the financials of the banks for the year ended on March 31st, 2017. The government asked the RBI to ease the norms to enable or to provide more credit to the economy. And Section 7, another area in which the conflict arose was based on the Section 7 of the RBI Act of 1934. As per this section, the government, which is a stakeholder in 21's public sector bank, is issuing direction to RBI. This section empowers government to issue direction to RBI in public interest. Section states that direction must be issued after consultation with the RBI governor. As per this section 7 of RBI Act, the government can provide directions to the RBI. Using this section, which was never used before, the government argued that they can give directions to the RBI for the public interest. Another area of conflict between the RBI and government was with respect to the surpluses of RBI, how to use the surplus with the RBI. The surplus is created. RBI earns interest from domestic and foreign bond it holds. This income is used for running the operation of RBI and rest is accrued as surplus. Out of this surplus, RBI holds some amount of itself as equity capital to maintain its creditworthiness and pays the rest to the government. That is, the surplus that created from the interest of domestic and foreign bond is used for the day-to-day running of the RBI, and a portion is kept with the RBI and the rest is paid to the government. 2015, RBI's risk analysis showed that its equity position of around rupees 10 lakh crores was adequate. The bank decided to transfer its entire surplus to the government, which is around 65,876 crores for the year 2015-16. Government is of the opinion that RBI should pay more dividends The government is of the opinion that RBI should pay more dividends. The contingency fund and asset reserves by the RBI has been in excess of what is required to maintain its creditworthiness. That is argued that provision of more and more dividend will increase the inflationary situations in the market, and uh, it will create problem with the macroeconomic stability of the Indian economy. Also note that surplus is used for meeting the appreciation of rupee against one or more currencies. If there is a decline in the rupee value of gold, then this surplus amount is used for in the situations. Based on all these aspects, the worst conflict between or the worst consensus of or opinion between the government and the RBI in recent years.